in itself, but as one officer said, what was more disturbing was the presence of others. You see, there was many witnesses that saw what was happening and yet failed to report it or even intervene. Now, we could give account of like this time after time where people witness some type of crime taking place, and yet they choose to do nothing. And you ask, why would anyone not intervene? Well, there's actually a psychological effect that takes place. The more people you have, the less chances there are of one single person intervening. They call it the bystander effect. You ever heard of that? That it's the idea that when there's multiple people witnessing something, they first have this ignorance that is created by the majority or this large number of people. So see the situation. A lot of people are watching this event and no one's acting to intervene. So I must think, well, maybe there isn't a crime. Maybe it's staged or maybe something else because no one else is doing anything. So the first act or the first part of intervening requires us to have knowledge, right? That something's actually happening. And then the second thing is similar. It's this responsibility, because if I'm solely by myself and I watch someone get hit by a car, I'm 100% responsible and I'll act to call 911 or intervene, right? But when there's two people, what happens to my 100% responsibility? It goes down to 50%. If there's 10 people, now it's down to 10%, and a lot of people go, oh, they'll call. Someone always calls. I don't have to call. When there's 20, it even gets lower. And so there's this interesting effect, the bystander effect. When there's multiple people watching the same event, a lot of them will just do nothing. Now, why do I say that? It's because we live in a world where there's just two facts we have to consider from a spiritual point of view. And these two facts are a heavenly view, that the way God sees the world. First of all, there are people around us all over that are lost. And we don't have to look very far. My wife's up in Seattle, and in that area, there's nearly 3 or 4 million people living in the Seattle metropolitan area. You come down to Portland, there's over 2 million people that live in that area alone. You say, well, yeah, those are big cities, but we live in little Salem. Well, Salem, Kaiser, and the surrounding area, in 2016, they put the number of people at 410,000. That's a lot of people in this area. And our traffic reflects that, doesn't it? And so, but the large majority of them are lost spiritually, and we've talked about that. And God wants to do something about it. And so the question we can ask is, what can I do to help? And so let me first address our visitors and our guests. Thanks for being here. As a church of just Christians that are just trying to be simply Christians, and that's all, just like that we find in the New Testament. What you see that we're going to do here is just worship God the way they did in the New Testament. And we're so glad that you're here, and we wish that we could get to know you and study with you. But this morning's lesson is for our own members. We're talking about things that we can do to engage in this great work, and we call it evangelism. But a lot of times people hesitate and say, well, I can't evangelize, and it scares them because I'm not a teacher. I don't have that skill set. I can't talk like you do. I can't teach a class. Well, there are things that we can do. I've been listening to several people and reading a lot of material on this, and one preacher in Texas, Max Dawson, speaks about 4 things that you can do, that everybody can do. They're simple. And I'm going to add a 5th to them. But he talks about building bridges to the lost, because here we are on one side, and we're lost, and we want to find Christ on the other side, and we're over there with Christ, and we want to connect with one another. And how can we build these bridges to the lost? There are 4 things he suggests that are simple that we all can do. And again, we will add a 5th. And we get them all from the text that we preached out of our last lesson in Colossians chapter 4. in verse 2 through 6, where Paul is in trouble. He's in jail. Now, that's not why he's in trouble, but he needs help because he has no one to preach to because he's in jail. You think, Paul, take a break. You're in jail. Get out of there. Then we'll talk about sharing the gospel later. But he says, no, be devoted to prayer. Verse 2, praying at the same time for us, as well that God may open up to us, that's Paul and his friends in prison, a door for the word. He's looking for opportunities to speak. And so there's the value of prayer, that we might speak forth the mystery of Christ. There's the idea of speaking, that when we are given the opportunity, we want to speak. And then he says, in order, verse 4, that I may make it clear in the way that I ought to speak. Then verse 5, he says, conduct yourselves with wisdom. See, our conduct has a big part in building bridges. Conduct yourself with wisdom towards outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. And that means seizing the moment when we're given this door of opportunity. Verse 6, he's back to our speech. Let your speech always be with grace. Season it with salt, so you may know how you should respond. There's a right way to respond to people, and there's a wrong way to respond. So out of this text, we're going to see these 5 things. We want to pray to build bridges. We want to shine in our conduct to build bridges. We want to speak and say the right words to build bridges to those that are lost. We want to invite, that's making the most of the opportunity, and we want to welcome, knowing how we ought to respond to each person. We're going to look at these 5, and I want you to see again that these are things that you can do. And again, some people say, I've tried that. I failed. I've tried to reach my neighbor. I've tried to reach my family member, and I just can't study with someone. I don't have the skills. These are 5 things that everybody can do. And in fact, they don't require you to teach anything. They're that simple. So let's go through them, and we'll make some application for each one. The 5 things starts with the idea of prayer. Notice what Paul said in his prayer request. He's in prison. He said, pray for us at the same time. See, there's a work that's going on all the time. God lives above the arch of this world in the spiritual realm. He hears the prayers of people that are seeking him all the time. And I can't imagine the countless millions of people are lost in this world. They're just unhappy. They got this emptiness inside, and they're looking for something spiritual, God to fill it. And they're praying to him. At the same time, Paul says, we want to become part of this operation that's going on. So they're praying for something to find God. And he says, you pray that we might be connected with him. That God would open a door of opportunity. And so this person's praying to find God. This person's praying to find someone that's looking for God. And then God does what? He puts the 2 together. And we see multiple examples of that. We had a whole lesson on that. But I'm just asking you, this is one thing you can do. All of us can do. No teaching required. All you have to do is, in the privacy of your own life, in your own home, while you're driving down the road, just say that simple prayer. Now, we asked everyone to come up with a list of 3 names. And you might have a list of 10 names now. I've talked to many of you, and you said, yeah, I've been praying for these people. And some of you have talked to them. And so I know that you're taking this very seriously. But if you would just pray, God, open a door of opportunity that this person might come to know you. And to see what the heavenly powers and the miracles that can take place, that bringing this person that we might think would never have an opportunity, that see how God can bring them to us. Everyone can do that. And you say, well, I don't have a specific person. But then pray in general. Because we have many people that are willing to teach. They're willing people that have the skill set to share the gospel. So pray. And I'm asking everyone. You say, well, I'm just a widow, or I'm an older lady and I can't do anything. You can pray. Please bring someone to Jack, to Dave, to others, and some of the ladies, so they can share the gospel with them. And let's see what happens. Everyone can do that. And if we make it part of our daily life, that's what Paul's asking. He's in Rome, they're in Colossae, many, many miles apart. But prayer will connect the two. So that's one thing we can do. And then the second thing is you can shine. Now that was the text that was read for us in Matthew chapter 5, where it says, you are the light of the world. And he says, let your light shine in such a way that men, when they see your good works, what do? They glorify God. There's something about our behavior that attracts people to Christ. See, a light is to illuminate, to guide people, like a lighthouse. So we have many every 40 miles on the Oregon coast. They are to signal to people where to go or not to go. And Jesus says, your life is a light. Because as Christians, we're called to live different than the rest of the world. We're different in our language. Christians don't use the same language as others, and it's not because they're better than others or they're trying to be holier than thou. They just realize we want to speak words that bless. We want to speak words that build people up. We want to speak words that are pure and are wholesome. And so we don't use certain kind of language. We're called to never lie, because lies just tear things down and destroy society. We always speak the truth. We're people that we try to have better marriages. We try to be better citizens. We try to be better employees because God has called us to shine. And that's why we submit to our employers even if we don't like them, because we're serving God and not the employer. And so Jesus is asking us, be a light in the world. And rather than just serve yourself, he says, when you do these good works for others, it's going to cause them to look at you and glorify God. In 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 6 to 8, Timothy there exhorts the young men. That's a lot of us here. I'm almost still in that group. Be sensible and sound. He said, abound in good works so that people will have nothing to say evil about the gospel. See, people are watching, aren't they? And when they watch what we do, they say, hey, that guy's a Christian. Let's see how he lives. And when we act in a sensible way and practice good works, they'll have nothing evil to say about us. The same thing is taught to Timothy, the young evangelist. He said, let no one despise thy youth. In other words, don't give them a reason to look down on you. But in your faith, conduct, love, and purity, be an example of those who believe. See, what we do speaks more than what we say. Now, everyone can shine, can't they? Everyone can open the door for someone going into the grocery store. You say, well, that's so simple, but it's a courtesy that's lost so much today, isn't it? There's so many things we can do to shine. And God's asking us to shine. You don't even have to say anything. Just by your example, speak so much. And so then we ask, what else can we do? Well, we can speak. Notice Paul says, I want a door of opportunity so I can speak forth. And then he says, let your speech always be with grace, so you can know how to respond. And that's why in the Ephesians letter, in chapter 4, we're supposed to, as we're being transformed into the image of Christ, we're always going to speak the truth in love. Now, let's just be careful that we understand each other. We're not talking about teaching. We're not talking about preaching. We're talking about what? Speaking. I notice very few people have a problem with speaking. If anytime we have a problem with it, get them to not speak. We love to talk. And our favorite topic is ourselves. In fact, when you read, how to influence friends or make friends and influence people, one of the rules is talk in terms of others and not yourself. So when you meet someone, and if you just talk about yourself and all you've been doing and everything, people will just be bored. Because they're saying, what an egomaniac. But if you talk in terms of them, like, hey, how was your trip? How's it going? How are the kids? And you ask them questions, and they just talk about themselves, and you just say about this much, they're going to go away and say, man, it was the best conversation I've ever had. It happens because you're showing a genuine interest in them. What everyone talks, and what do we talk about? What we like. So we're talking about natural conversation. That's not preachy. It's not defensive. It's not fake. And so I know some of the men here like to talk about shooting. I never understood why some of the older men, I'm talking about men now, because they seem to do this more than the women, they love to talk about their grandchildren. It's like, what? They're just little babies. And then you have one, and then that all changes. Young people like to talk about their children, and then older people like to talk about their grandchildren, and they'll talk nonstop about them, show pictures and everything. Is it natural? Is it forced? No, it just comes easy as a matter of the conversation. Some people like to talk about sports. Some people like to talk about quilting. Everyone likes to talk about food, all right? And if Christ is the center of our life, when we are talking with others, they should know by our language that we're Christians. Now, how does that happen? What can you talk about? Well, I was talking, there's the word talking, with Bebeto just yesterday, that the idea of using the phrase, if the Lord wills. James says, don't say you're going to another city and start a business and make a bunch of money, because you don't know if you're going to be alive tomorrow. He says, rather you should say, if the Lord wills. I'm going to go to such and such a town and do this. Because really, it's not in my hands. I don't even have today, much less tomorrow. And so, can you make it as just a matter of your conversation when people say, hey, would you come over Friday night? I say, yeah, Lord willing, I'll be there. Now, is that preachy? Or are you acknowledging that your life is not in your control, and that if something happens, you don't make it, they can't come back and say, you lied because you said you'd be there Friday. No, I didn't say I'd be there. I said, Lord willing, I'll be there. And I was in an accident. I was in the hospital. I couldn't make it. The Lord wasn't willing, right? But isn't that true? When you say you're going to do something, you better do it. But often, you don't have control of the events. So it's okay to just say, Lord willing, I'd love to come over to your house. And someone says, that's a tragedy, that loss of that loved one, or you lost your job. How are you holding out? I said, man, I don't know, it's tough. But I'm always thinking of what Jesus said, I'll never fail you and I'll never forsake you. Now, are you talking to them about what they need to do? They ask something about you personally, and you could just say, fine, I'm doing fine. Or you could be honest and say, speaking the truth in love, it's tough. It's tough. But my God said he'll never fail me, and I'm just hanging on that he'll never forsake me. You're giving something personal, aren't you? You're talking about yourself. And they might go away, I've been through some tough things. And maybe that's my problem. I need to start looking to my God like he does or she does. See, we can integrate Christ and God in our conversation because we do with one another. But sometimes when it comes to dealing with those outside, we just clam up because they won't care. And that's because we've all heard people that are preachy, they're fanatics, and they get on the street corners and they embarrass Christ and they embarrass you. And you say, I don't want to be one of those. We're not talking about being one of those. Talking about Christ belongs to us. It's our privilege, it's our freedom, and it's not theirs. And so we're not ashamed. We'll confess Christ. That means to talk about him openly in a natural way. And everyone can do that. They can speak, can't they? And it's amazing how often we're intimidated not to say anything for fear of rejection. But hey, it's my life. We're trying to build bridges. Hey, someone tells you this. My life's just, man, my mother's got cancer and we don't know if she's going to make it. Here's a response. Would it be okay if I prayed for your mom? You ask them permission. You're not going to tell them, well, you ought to just pray for her and that would fix it. That's preachy, right? But it'd be say, hey, would it be okay if I prayed for your mom? They might go, well, yes, of course. No one asked them that. What's her name? So I could pray for her by name. And they tell your name. Is that a personal building a bridge? And then later you come back and say, how's your mom doing? All right? We can all speak. The third thing we can do, we can all invite. Notice we haven't taught a class yet. We haven't even preached what you have to do to be saved. We're just trying to build bridges. And this is something all of us can do, even if we're not Christians, about just building better relationships, but especially when we're trying to reach those that are around us that are lost. Look in John chapter 1. Here's this model of how Christianity grew so explosively from the very beginning. Jesus appears after his baptism, and first of all, we find Philip in verse 44. It was from Bethsaida, and Philip, verse 45, after he is introduced to Jesus, he finds Nathanael and said to him, "We found him." I'm in John 1, verse 45, "Of whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." And Nathanael, he resists and objects. You'll hear this all the time. An objection, not this kind. But he says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Because Jesus was from the town of Nazareth. It was just a hodum, a town that nothing good would come out of there. Now, does Nathanael come back at him with a rebuttal or a debate? What does he say? Philip said to him, "Come and see." Now, that's an invitation. See, Philip was found, and found people go find someone else and say, "Hey, we found the Christ." And he goes, "No, that can't be the Christ. Come look for yourself." That's an invitation. That's knowing how to respond, because, see, people are going to be praying. That's our first point. God, connect us with people that are looking. And God puts you in someone's proximity, whether it's a taxi cab driver, someone at the checkout stand, or someone on the street. And then the conversation comes up, and you have the wonderful privilege not to preach, not to teach, but just to simply invite. Hey, come and see for yourself. How many times have I heard people say, "I'm looking for a church"? Oh, really? What an opportunity. Doors wide open, double doors, right? And we just, "Hey, really, I've got one I could recommend to you." And that's when you give them your card that we printed up. All of them are gone. I had to open another box. We're going to have to order some more. And all it says is, "Be our guest." And it shows you the location, the times of service. And so when someone's, "Hey, I'm looking for a church," well, here, be my guest. Come. And I'll look for you when you get there. All right? It's that simple. What did I preach or teach? You don't even have to say anything. A person that cannot speak could do this. Right? Everyone can do this. And there's nothing on there that's controversial. And that's what we're trying to do, is invite people. Just come and see. Now, a lot of times people don't do this for several reasons. They don't invite because they don't realize their intent is not open to look for people to invite. They're not aware that the possibility, the opportunity is there. Now, it's interesting. We just have to open our awareness to all the opportunities. There's over 400,000 people in the Salem area. There's enough people to invite, right? Now, when you're looking for a new car, or new house, what do you notice when you're driving around when you're looking for a house? Every for sale sign, don't you? Just because that's what your mind's thinking about. Some of you, when you get older and retire, and you're driving around, you're looking for garage sales, you see every estate sale sign, right? Right? You drive, your car just automatically turns there, right? The same way, if you're looking for it and you're aware of that and you're looking for opportunities, they're everywhere. They're at the store, they're at the gas station, they're at everyone you meet, at someone's house, at an ugly Christmas sweater party. There's opportunities everywhere if you're just thinking that way. A lot of people say, "Well, I don't know what to say." You don't have to say anything. Say, "Hey, just come be my guest at worship service this Sunday." Well, a lot of people say, "Well, I'm embarrassed they'll reject me." So most people will take the card, but they won't say, "No, I'd never come there." They'll be polite. You won't be rejected. Some people, studies have showed, they don't know where to look or what to say. We've addressed that. Sometimes they say, "Well, I don't think they'd like our preacher." Okay. We have a problem then, all right? I promise, if you bring a guest, I will never say anything that's offensive directed at them. We will speak the truth in love, but we'll try to be concise and just speak what God says. Because we're not here to embarrass anyone. We're trying to bring people to God. And so often that's the reason. They don't know what to say, and there may be fearful of rejection, but everyone can invite someone. This invitation process is really the heartblood of evangelism. And we're going to talk later about personal evangelism, relationship evangelism, talking to people you already know. But there's so many people we don't know. And if there's 140 people here this morning, times 3 on your list that you're praying for, and you handed out this card and invited 3 people for our Sunday neighborhood worship day where we're inviting our neighbors December 9th. If everyone asks 3 people, 140 times 3 is 280, 320, 420 people are invited. If 10% came, that would be 42 people would be here on that Sunday, December 9th. If only 5% came, that's 21. And that's probably 15 more than are here today. So this drives, it's the fuel of evangelism. That's where contacts come from. Everyone doing their part. And notice, this is something everyone can do. You can pray, you can shine, you can speak, you can invite. You don't have to preach or teach or do anything. You don't have to know a single scripture. I say, hey, would you come? Would you come? It's so simple. And then the last one is probably the most important. It's the 5th thing, it's welcome. Now we're at services. Now that guest does show up. How are we going to treat them? It's interesting, Jesus speaks a lot about how we deal with one another, our neighbor. James says that if someone comes and he looks to be rich and you give him the best seat, but the poor man, you just don't even give any regard. He said, you've just been evil with hearts of partiality. And well, Jesus puts it this way. He talking about loving one another. He says, if you greet only your brothers, that's those you like. In this case, it would be Jewish friends. But if you only greet your brothers, what are you doing more than others? Don't even the Gentiles do the same? See, his argument is the Gentiles, the non-Jews, who do they talk to? Their own. And you guys don't intermingle. And you're just as like them. And you can say, see, they have nothing to do with this. Because you have nothing to do with them. So he says, you're to be perfect. That means mature, like your Father's mature. Because he extends himself to who? Everyone. So when we're talking about building bridges, and someone comes, all right, I got to be very careful because we have guests here, and we're not talking about being manipulative. We're not talking about trying to seduce people anyway. We're just trying to talk about how we can be friends. And let's do it this way. If you invited someone or a guest to your house for dinner, and they arrived early, and there's a table set, and they sit down at the table, and there's all the place settings are set, and you come in, and you just got late from work, everyone's sitting, you see that he's in your seat, and you say, excuse me, that's my seat. Would you please move? Now, would the guests move? Yes. And then you go on and you proceed to eat dinner, and the conversation is, hey, children, tell me about school. Hey, Johnny, how was sports today? You know, make any tackles. Then you talk about the wife. How did it go? And everyone talks to each other, but no one talks to the invited guest. But they feel just a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. Then afterwards, everyone gets up and they go into the TV room and they watch Frozen for the little girl in the family. And they leave the guest in the dining room. Would that person ever come back to dinner to your house ever again? And you say, well, we would never treat anyone that's a guest in our house like that. Yet it happens every day in every assembly across this land. We have people that come to this house. They are our guests. They're not spoken to. They're not addressed. They're treated like they're not even there. And yet everyone talks to their own friends because they're excited to see them. And that's reasonable because we're getting together for the first time for some of us the whole week. And there's just this buzz and we're talking. And we're not saying don't talk to each other, but realize there's guests in the house. So how would we treat them? We would treat them, let me just give you some tips. Welcoming them starts in the parking lot. Why do you say parking lot? Have you ever driven up to a place when you're traveling? I have. And you're unsure about going in, so you sit in the parking lot, and Ann says, let's go in. I said, no, let's just sit here a while. And you're looking to see who's going in and who's coming out, and you go, all right, I think it's getting time we can go in. And actually, this happens. You've done that. And I've seen people sit in, and you might ask them, why? I saw you sit in the car. Is everything okay? So, yeah, I was just a little scared about coming in. It's a scary thing to come to a place you've never been, and you don't know what's going to happen. You don't know anybody. So welcoming starts in the lot. Someone gets out of their car. Hey, I don't think I've seen you. I'm Jack. What's your name? Vern. Vern, come on in. I'll show you around. Right? Is that welcoming? They say people's impression, whether they'll return to a congregation or an assembly, is formed in 10 seconds. It's formed that quickly. Another 25% of people never come to church because they're never invited. They would come. Surveys show that 25% of people would come if they were just invited. They just don't know they can come. They don't realize they're not invited, and they're waiting for an invitation. But when they come, it starts in the parking lot. Then it moves to the foyer. Because if they walk in and there's people talking, some people are talking guns here, other people are talking about the Oregon game, and they're feeling awkward. They don't know where to go, do they? They finally see the double doors. I guess I'm supposed to go in here, and they walk in, and they don't know where to sit. So they sit down somewhere, and then someone comes up, excuse me, that's my seat. Has that ever happened? Yes. Now, Brittany was apologizing because her and Jordan were sitting up here, and someone came in late, and they looked up, and someone was in their seat. And I said, good for you. Make them sit somewhere else. Right? I didn't see Dane's name on that seat. Do you see any names on anybody's seat anywhere here? No. And so sometimes we should just mix it up just so we get to know other people around us. I'm just teasing, right? All right. So then you meet them in the foyer and say, welcome. Just be nice. Say, let me show you to your seat. And you take them up to a place in the seat and let them sit there. And then explain to them, here's what's going to happen in our service today. We're going to sing some songs. And then we are going to observe the Lord's Supper. And I'd love to share with you, if you want to, what that is. And then at the appropriate time, we're going to have a lesson from God's Word. And then we're going to sing a song. We'll be done. And so you just give them a little briefing of what's going on because they don't know what to expect. But you welcome them. Maybe send them by someone that you know will engage with them because they're going to welcome them when they're sitting there. Isn't that what we do when someone comes to our house? Amen. At our dinner table? We're just doing the exact same thing. Now, sometimes the objection says, I don't want to do that because you can scare people away if everyone talks to them. You scare more people away by not talking to them at all. Right? I'd rather be overly gracious, overly kind when it's not fake and it's genuine than being avoid people. So welcoming. Then we have to practice the 10-minute rule. The 10-minute rule we've talked about before. When services are over, what naturally happens as soon as the amen is over, we look for our friends so we can start catching up and talking to them. And so there's a group here, there. And that's natural, isn't it? There's nothing wrong with that. That's what we're here for. The 10-minute rule says for the first 10 minutes, you do not think about talking to a friend. You get your eyes open. Who's here that I don't know so I can go up and say hi and welcome them? For 10 minutes. And say, hey, Vern, it's really good to see you, And where are you from? You're Salem? Oh, really? He says, oh. And sometimes it's a student. Oh, where are you? Going to school. I go to Oregon State. Oh, really? Then we do the handoff. Let me introduce you to a guy that loves the Beavers even though they lose. And I bring him over and introduce him to Bruce, right? And then I go look for someone else. And sometimes it's maybe not Bruce, it's let me introduce you to one of our elders. Let me introduce you to the preacher. So the next time they come, do they already know someone? They might know 2 or 3 people, maybe don't remember their names, but can remember, yeah, I met that guy, I met that person, I met that lady. So for 10 minutes, we don't talk to friends. We look for those in our immediate area that we haven't welcomed yet. Now, that's why I apologize to our guests, because afterwards, Amber's here, and Dave invited her. How easy to invite. And I said, how'd you get here? She said, well, I was invited. Oh, really? What a novel concept. And now everyone's going to come and say hi to you, but that's okay, isn't it? And there's others. She's a friend of Dave Larson Jr., so I'm really glad you're here. And we're not saying this to embarrass anyone, and you say, well, this is not natural. Yes, it should be natural, because that's what you do at your own family. It's the heart blood of showing love and care for each other. It's just saying hi. Now, let me just say a couple things that you don't do, because there's always someone to say, okay, I don't know what to say, so I'm just going to ask some questions. Where are you from? Salem. What do you do? Well, I work for the bank. Oh, how much money do you make? Certain things, you just don't go there. You just learn to be pleasant. Well, really glad you're here. What'd you think of service? And hope to see you again. And then give them a list or one of your cards that shows the times of our service. Now, when I put all these together, I hope that you're impressed with the fact these are simple things that we all can do. I hope I never come across a crime scene where someone's being attacked. It happened in New York on a bridge. A person was attacked and people just drove by and didn't do anything. I hope I'm never at a situation where someone's being assaulted. Because that's just an evil thing, and I know I'll have to do something, and I want to, but it's a horrendous thing, isn't it? But yet we live in a world where there are people all around us that are going to be eternally separated from their God. And it's a crisis that's greater than any crime that's ever happened on this earth. And in a very real sense, we're all bystanders. And we can let that bystander mentality creep into our lives and realize, well, there's a lot of people and no one's excited, so I guess it must not be really that important because no one else is saying anything, so why should I? See, that's that ignorance. They don't realize how serious it is. The other thing is, remember, it's this responsibility. Well, who am I? I can't do anything, And that's why we've been talking about 5 things. You can do every one of these. You can pray. You can let your light shine. You can speak words naturally about who you are. You can invite people today, and it just becomes a part of your life. You're just inviting people all the time. Some will, most won't accept, but that's okay. And then you can welcome people. And if we practice that and talk about it all the time, we'll create a culture here where people will come to realize they're really, truly loved, and we do care about them. If you're with us and you realize, man, I want to be part of God's family. I've been looking too long, trying to figure things out myself. I need God in my life. We're going to sing a song, and it's, this world's not my home. I'm just passing through. Isn't that true for all of us? If we can help you, we're just going to ask you to come forward, and we'll just address your needs as they are as we stand and sing.